Welcome back to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans, new and old, to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 4.
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
And I'm your host, Mia Sabanko.
Now let's get into this week's episode. This week, we're discussing Season 4, Episode 11, Trial by Magic. It originally aired on January 24th, 2002, and had 4.14 million viewers.
Here we are for once. Jess and I are actually recording together. This is a rare occasion. Very exciting. All right, so this episode we start out in the manor and we're in the kitchen and it's morning time. Paige and Piper are pouring juice and coffee, and then Phoebe walks in and takes the coffee pot from Paige. She says she's running late for jury duty, which she's apparently been doing for 2 weeks, and is very tired. Then Paige says, I'd be tired too if I had to decide whether someone lived or died. What's your decision? And Phoebe says, Paige, I can't talk about the case. Besides, that's not why I can't sleep. I can't sleep because I miss Cole too much. If he doesn't come home soon, I'm going to turn into a vampire. And Piper says, jokes like that in this house, not so funny. And then Piper asks when she thinks he might come back, and she says, who knows? He said he needed some time to find himself, figure out who he was without his demon side. And then they all just kind of make a couple of jokes, and Phoebe says that she has to go. And she starts walking away to the parlor. Then Piper and Paige follow her, like very curious, and Piper starts asking who's testifying today, and Phoebe says, nobody, it's closing arguments. And they're like, already? That was fast. And she says, oh no, not you too. And then Piper's like, come on, Phoebe, it's only natural to be curious. And then Paige nods in agreement and says, nobody keeps secrets better than us. We're the mistresses of secrets. And Piper says, well, Phoebe's like, well, let's just say it'll be my supreme pleas to send that murdering bastard straight to hell, by legal means, not magical. And Piper says, you might actually be the first person who enjoys jury duty. And she says that it might be nice for once to get some kudos for vanquishing the bad guy. I mean, punishing. You know what I mean.
So, cute little opening scene here as far as kind of the sisters and their morning routine and all of that. Why is Julian McMahon always gone? At least this time they mentioned that he was gone, but what the fuck are we supposed to think he's doing?
I don't know. They don't give us much of an explanation, especially like before when he did have his powers, they always kind of blamed it on like, oh, he's, out fighting off the bounty hunter. Exactly. And like now it's like, what's the excuse for him just being non-existent for like multiple episodes at a time?
That they don't have the budget for the guest star.
I guess, like, I don't know, very weird. Because at this point, you would think he's like a main character. So what is, I don't know, a little confusing to me.
Yeah, I don't really get it. And like, I totally forgot that Cole just vanishes sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
every time he's gone, I'm like, oh yeah, he's not here.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I didn't even acknowledge the fact that he wasn't here until they brought it up.
In terms of the jury duty stuff, again, something that I feel like comes up a lot in TV. Like, people are like, oh, I have jury duty, whatever. Phoebe seems really into the case, which is kind of cute. Her sister is being really curious about what's going on because, they share literally everything with each other. Also, really cute and working for me. And this idea that Phoebe likes being able to punish someone by legal means, I think is pretty interesting too.
I think so too. I mean, for her to feel like, oh, finally I can do this in public and like get the bad guy and not have to have it be this big secret, and like, I mean, to be fair, they really don't get that. And yeah, to get some acknowledgement for the fact that like they are doing justice or protecting the innocent, that's gotta be nice for Phoebe.
Yeah, especially since it's bringing us back to like that earlier struggle of like, oh, it's not our job to punish the guilty. It's not our job to do that. And then this time it actually is her job and she seems like really into it, which is cool. I'm interested to see where the episode's gonna go with this. And yeah. Have you ever done jury duty?
Oh, no, I haven't done jury duty yet. Have you?
I don't have to.
Yeah, no, I haven't done it yet. I mean, to be fair, I'm only 19, but I haven't been called or anything to it, so I
Right.
hope if I do, it's an interesting case like this.
Yeah, because like, and if it's a boring case and a long case, like they pay you very low. So it's kind of like, that's why people don't like doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we're over in the entryway, and when Phoebe opens the door to leave, Glen is there. Welcome back, Glen. And asks if Paige is home. Phoebe leaves and he goes in. Him and Paige hug and she asks what he's doing there. He says he's back from Australia and he's about to go to Nepal but wanted to stop by and see her. They're like making hard eyes at each other. It's pretty cute. And Piper clears her throat and Paige introduces them even though they've literally already met.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And then Glenn's like, I still can't believe you've got sisters. And Piper says, yeah, it takes some getting used to. And Paige asks where he's staying and then invites him to stay at the manor. And Piper's like, what? And Paige is like, it completely ignores this and tells him where her room is and that she'll be right up. And he goes. And Piper's like, Paige. And she's like, what? And she's like, I don't think it's a good idea for your boyfriend to stay here. And she's like, he's not my boyfriend. Well, sometimes he's my boyfriend, but mostly he's just my really good friend. And she's like, well, we usually don't have house guests because of all the obvious reasons. And Paige says, you can trust Glenn. He's been my friend since God, kindergarten. And Piper says, you haven't been a witch since kindergarten. And I don't think you understand. And she's like, I understand that I also pay rent here. And Piper's like, there is no rent. She's like, it's an expression. Piper's like, no, it's not. And Paige is like, well, it should be. And like makes a face at her and goes upstairs.
I love it. Paige is so like the teenager of the house, you know what I mean? I love it so much.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we're getting some more backstory of the Paige and Glen thing. So, like I think we were kind of hypothesizing last episode, clearly they've dated in the past. Now they're just friends.
Yeah, they've got like a very interesting situation, a very like friends with benefits, but we love each other kind of thing going
Yeah.
on. I mean, to each their own.
The original situationship.
Literally, it feels very much like they would be together if it wasn't for the fact that he's a traveler. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of relationship that they give off.
Yeah, definitely. And, we get this backstory of, again, they've known each other since kindergarten, so they go way, way back.
I wish if that were the case, we could have seen him in the one we just watched. What was it called?
A Page from the Past.
That was A Page from the Past?
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could have seen him in that, like, as her friend in high school. If they've known each other since kindergarten, that would have been cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
unless
past
they had,
Glen.
like, some type of falling out because she was a bad girl in high school.
She's a bad girl. She had the bangs and the braces. Aside from that, I like that we're gonna have Glen here with us, which is definitely gonna make it a little bit interesting because I mean, obviously, we can already assume that things are gonna be going down like they always do.
I don't know what you mean, Mia. I think this is going to be a very like plain episode. No magic,
Yeah,
no demons. We have jury duty and we have Glenn, and that's it.
That's it. That's the whole episode. Yeah, no, but I definitely am looking forward to having like somebody who doesn't know the secret involved and seeing kind of how that goes. So,
Yeah, it's very much bringing back to like season 1 vibes when they were like keeping the secret from
With
Andy and all that. So I'm
agree.
excited to see that kind of play out. I also like, Piper's reactions here, which all make total sense because she's like, he can't stay here.
Yeah. She's very older sistery about it, like trying to be like, you're an adult, but like this is not okay, and like I can't control what you do, but this is not right. You know what I mean?
Also, when Paige is like, I pay rent here, and Piper's like, no, you don't.
Yeah, like that's not even an expression either. Like,
yeah. Piper is sick of these freeloading bitches in her house.
She's over it.
She's the only one contributing, I guess, because even though Paige has a job, it's not contributing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're able to have Leo there without paying anything, then
yeah, but that's her husband.
Yeah, but
so
like
she's supporting him financially.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if. Oh yeah, because
Paige has a job, so she could contribute.
Who says she doesn't?
Piper just said she does not pay any rent.
No, she didn't. She said it's not an expression.
She said there is no rent.
Yeah, but I assume Paige helps with the mortgage or like the monthly bills.
I don't know. That's not what I'm getting here. I'm getting that Paige is freeloading. She didn't sell her apartment.
I mean, I don't think she would have also been like, well, I also pay to live here if she didn't pay to live there. You know what I mean?
But I feel like then Piper wouldn't have said there is no rent. She would have just been like, fair enough, you do pay rent here.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. I think Paige contributes a little since she lives there.
Unknown. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't.
Yeah,
the
we
show
never-
did not make it clear to us.
Yeah,
To
you
me,
guys decide what you think. I think she pays
write in and let
pays
us
a
know.
little bit there, but you
Is
guys
Paige freeloading or is she contributing?
like Piper must have to be making a lot of money to afford that fucking house if she's paying it on her own.
P3 is a success, obviously.
This much of a success is crazy.
What was it? They make $200,000 a month or something, or a year?
Was that what it was?
I don't think. No, remember she was like, "We need $200,000 a year to pay the bills."
Yeah, like that was. Are you kidding me? Anyways, moving on. So then we go to the courthouse, and Phoebe is sitting there with the other jurors, and the DA is talking about how the defendant has no alibi and no credible explanation for how he was able to lead the police directly to his ex-wife's body, other than his, how did he describe it? Psychic vision? Or no, a premonition. That's what Mr. Provenzoli expects you to believe to counter the overwhelming evidence against him, including the murder weapon. And then she passes it around to the jurors, and when Phoebe touches it, she has this premonition and sees the murderer has this Medusa tattoo on their forearm. And she drops the knife then, and the judge asks if she's all right. And then the defendant stretches and she sees that there's no tattoo on his arm, so it becomes obvious to her that he wasn't the killer.
Yes. And I'd also like to say that him wearing a short sleeve shirt to court was so obviously for plot's sake, so she could see his arm.
Genuinely. Like, I've never seen anybody not wear a button up that's like actually
Full sleeve.
yeah, like actually presentable in a court of law. Okay.
You know what we say.
Plot's sake.
Exactly. But no, I mean, this scene works. It's very straightforward to the point. We get the fact that Phoebe, of course, is having a premonition. He has premonitions. We have a male witch.
Yeah, that's not something we ever really get. I like that they kind of included that here. And again, I guess it's not something we know for sure, but they kind of give it away in the first scene here where he claims to have this vision of the future and he's not the one that did it, as we know. So Phoebe now believes him, which again, as someone who has psychic visions, you would think she would have thought twice about it a little bit.
Yeah, like especially when he directly called it a premonition and that's like the same name as her power, like think a little bit, Phoebe, here.
Yeah.
Like if
And
he was just
they'll-
like, oh, I had like a psychic dream, then maybe don't believe him, but like, come on.
Yeah, and they'll kind of call her out for that a little bit later, but still, it's like Phoebe, come on, should have picked up on that. Well, either way, we get pretty much the information that this guy's not the killer, and I assume that's going to be a big plot line in the episode.
Yes, I agree. So after that, we have the theme song. Then we're in like the little jury deliberating room, and the jurors are walking in and talking about how it should be a quick decision. They all sit down, and this one guy jokes that he got a premonition that they'll be out of there in time for lunch. And the foreman starts going through a procedure and says that they need to review the evidence. And the jokester's like, who's in favor of guilty? And raises his hand, and so does everyone else except for Phoebe. And he's like, come on, lady, what's it going to be? And she's like, I have to go to the bathroom. And she gets up and runs over to the bathroom. And once she's inside, she whisper calls for Leo and asks him to orb her to the manor.
So, not too much here. We got kind of a little asshole who may make it difficult for Phoebe to kind of prove that this guy is innocent. I mean, in general, if the only thing you have to go on is this psychic vision like he did, then how is she going to really convince him? Because who would understand that?
Yeah, I totally get the attitude that the other jurors are kind of projecting here. Though this guy is obviously kind of just like, get me the fuck out of here. Whereas the foreman seems a little more interested in procedure. But then once this guy takes over, he's kind of like the loudmouth of the group, which we'll see throughout the episode. and can easily convince the others to, like, let's just vote now, like, forget about the due process and what we're actually supposed to be doing here.
Which, again, is very wrong. And if that does happen, I feel very sad.
Definitely, because I mean, the whole point of these trials, right, with jury is that you're supposed to be getting a fair review by peers. So when it's rushed like this and they're not even going to talk about the evidence, even if it is a pretty quick decision, they're all convinced, they should still be kind of going by what they're supposed to do. And then maybe they could still get lunch after. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that it's very fair. Whether it's obvious or not, this is still something that it should be like a due process and they go through the formalities because it is somebody's life at the end of the day at stake. And, mistakes get made and you never know. So, yeah. And this is one of those things where it has to be like unanimous, right?
yeah, if not, it's a hung jury and then it has to get a new trial.
Okay. So then we move back to the manor in the living room, and the sisters and Leo are all there. And Paige is like, I thought you said it was an open and shut case. And Phoebe says, so did I. But the killer in my premonition was definitely not Stan Provenzoli. Now, I didn't see his face, but he had a tattoo on his arm like a Medusa's head with snakes. And Paige says, so what are you going to do? She says, well, I'm going to stall while you guys try and get Daryl to get you guys to see Stan. Describe the tattoo. Maybe he knows the real killer. I don't know. He must not have seen him in his premonition, otherwise. And Leo said, wait, he had a premonition? And Phoebe says, yeah, that's how he claims to have known where the body was. And Piper's like, and you of all people did not believe him. She's like, Piper, he's just a club magician. I assumed he was a fraud. Believe me, I feel horrible about this. She says, all right, we'll fix it somehow. And Paige says, do we hunt killers that aren't demons? And Phoebe says, well, I had that premonition for a reason. Just because the killer isn't supernatural. And then Glen starts walking in, and Leo's like, hey there, Glen. And they all kind of shut up about the supernatural talk. And Piper's like, what did you hear? And Glen's like, excuse me? And Phoebe says, she said, what are you doing here? And he said, I was just looking for the kitchen. Didn't you leave already? And she says, yeah, now I'm back, but I better get going again before somebody wonders what happened to me. Then Paige takes Glen to the kitchen for a sandwich, and Phoebe whispers, is he staying here? And Piper's like, uh-huh. And Phoebe thinks that she should talk, like Piper should talk to Paige. And Piper says, I did. Apparently, I was the only one paying attention. And then Phoebe sighs, and that's the end of that scene.
So, plan here looks kind of good. Somehow get them in to see Stan, which I'll have questions about when we actually get there, but for now, I'll just let that plan rest. She tells them, obviously, that she saw the tattoo. They need to be on the lookout for that. And of course, this is Paige's first time dealing with a non supernatural bad guy.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. She has not dealt with that before. She's only dealt with the supernatural, and I wonder if it'll be like difficult for her to kind of maybe find somebody and put them in their place like this.
Definitely. And I also do like the way that they call out Phoebe, kind of like I was last seen, because if the episode hadn't done it, I would have had many questions about nobody was like, Phoebe, come on, this is literally your fucking power, babe.
Literally. So I'm glad we weren't the only ones who had some confusion about that. But I mean, him being a club magician, I can understand where Phoebe's coming from at the same time.
But Phoebe was the amazing Phoebe.
Oh yeah, with Prue, I forgot about that. Yeah, she should have at least considered it, I'd say. I mean, there's not much logic behind that as somebody who has the same power. You'd think, okay, well maybe it is real.
You want to call plot sake on that?
I guess we're gonna have to.
Yeah, I think so too. In terms of the Glen stuff, I mean, this little section works for me. He's kind of just doing his own thing and, of course, interrupting supernatural happenings as the sisters were afraid would happen. And Paige just does not care, I guess.
Yeah, she's the only one who doesn't seem to be bothered about it while everybody else has a problem.
Exactly. So then we're back at the courthouse in the jury room, and the jokester is banging on the bathroom door, and everyone's concerned about like why Phoebe's not coming out. But then she does, and she's like, I am so sorry. It's that time of the month. And he's so disgusted because, of course, he's a man. So, period.
Gotta be like, ugh,
Disgusting. Ugh. And he's like, look, the rest of us finished voting. 11 guilty. What's it going to be? And she says, well, before I cast my vote, I think we should all consider the possibility that the defendant might actually be a psychic. And everyone is so annoyed. And she's like, and all he is guilty of is having a special gift. And this woman says, you're the foreman, make her vote. And she says, not until I review the evidence, every single piece.
period, Phoebe. She said, I don't give a fuck what you guys think.
I love it. I think she's doing a really good job at stalling here. Kind of like I was making jokes. It's really annoying that this man is so grossed out, but you know what? If that's what you got to do to get the man to step back a little, good for you, Phoebe. Use that to your advantage. I like it. Use the misogyny.
I mean, it works like a charm. Even to this day, that's something that still exists. So, if it works, we can at least use it. We can at least take advantage of it.
Yes. Also, we're obviously getting the idea that these jury people are not believers in the supernatural because they are not into this psychic theory. They're like, come on.
Yeah. And we're going to see more of Phoebe trying to stall and trying to be a little bit convincing without actually having to give away her powers like she's able to. And she does a pretty good job. I don't know. We'll see Phoebe doing a pretty good job at trying to stall them and convince them of the truth.
Yeah.
So then back at the manor in the kitchen, Paige gives Glen a sandwich and says that she needs to go to work, and she says that he can drop her off and use her car. But he says that he's tired and is just gonna hang out here, and Paige is like, oh. And he says, Paige, is everything okay? What was going on in there? She says, oh, that was just a family meeting, deciding who's gonna take out the trash and whose turn it is to clean the bathroom. We take it all very seriously here. But then he's like, I heard words like killer and supernatural. Doesn't sound like housework to me. We never really could lie to each other very well. And she says, well, maybe that's why we didn't make it as a couple. And he says, I've been worried about you since the last time I saw you, just before you moved in here. And the vibe that I've been getting since I got here doesn't make me worry any less. She says, everything's fine, Glen, just fine. Things are just different now. And he says, yeah, you have sisters to talk to, and I think that's great, I really do. But that doesn't mean we still can't be there for each other, does it? Talk to me, Paige. What's going on? And she looks at him very conflicted, because obviously she wants to tell him. And then Piper and Leo walk in, and Piper says, Paige, Daryl got us that thing with the guy that Phoebe was talking about. Are you coming? And she says, I can't. I have to go to work. And Leo's like, all right, well, keep your cell phone available just in case anything comes up. And she nods and walks out, and Piper follows. Then Leo smiles awkwardly and says, excuse me, and follows her too.
So obviously, Glen is suspect of what is going on in the Hallowell Manor.
Oh, absolutely.
He does not trust these bitches.
Mhm.
And he cares about Paige. And I think it feels very sincere. Like, I do understand where he's coming from because obviously he's seen a lot of changes in Paige's behavior and attitude since she met her sisters.
Absolutely.
So I'll have more to say kind of later in the episode with where his theories go and stuff, but like I do think it's working and it makes sense as far as their relationship and how close they are. This idea that their relationship didn't work out because they couldn't lie to each other is so funny to me because like what?
I was thinking the same thing, especially like as I was reading it, I was like, I forgot that he even said, or she even said that. And that's like,
It's like lie to me, babe, please.
yeah. Like, honey, if only you were able to lie to me, then things would be great.
Like, pretty sure the reason my last relationship didn't work out was because all he did was lie to me. So,
Yeah, you and me both.
I don't know, Paige. I don't think we're on the same page here. But, that's what she thinks. So, let's hope whoever becomes her future romantic interest
Is able
lies
to lie to her all the time.
Honestly, she would have loved Cole.
Oh, genuinely. But I will say, like, I mean, I kind of understand she's just a little flustered and didn't really know what to say in that moment. And it makes me kind of sad because we've seen all the sisters have relationships like this where they're like very conflicted on whether or not they should tell them, you know? And it does become a struggle. It does become a problem because these people think that they're just like ditching them, abandoning them, clearly hiding something, and they want to tell them so bad, but they can't, or they're nervous too, or don't know if they should. So you can see very clear, like Paige. This is Paige's first time going through that. Now that Glen's here,
Yeah, and it very much is kind of like a callback to what Prue went through with Andy in season 1. Obviously, we also saw Piper have that struggle in her relationship with Dan, but that was a newer relationship, whereas both of these are like long-term, lifetime, on and off type couple things.
Yeah, and even we saw a little bit of that with Phoebe and Cole, but that was before she knew that Cole already was supernatural himself. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And then, of course, we have Paige deciding that she's going to go to work, which leaves Glen alone at the manor while Piper and Leo go to kind of follow up on Stan. So then we're in the parlor entryway area, and Piper asks Paige if she's going to leave him there alone. And she's like, well, I can't fit him in my cubicle with me at work. Leo says, Paige, keeping your secret has to be the most important thing. And she says, I know, which is why I just lied to my best friend. It didn't feel good, Leo, but I did it. Piper says, that's not good enough. It's irresponsible to leave him here. And she says, you told me when I became a witch that I could still have a life. I call having a friend having a life. And she says, yeah, but that doesn't mean you can. And Glen walks in calling for Paige, and they all look at him, and he's like, oh, I'm interrupting again. And Piper's like, yeah, all right, we gotta go. So be sure to lock all the doors before you go. And Paige looks super pissed off and annoyed with her, and they leave. And Glen's like, she always that friendly? Paige is like, yeah, pretty much. I'll see you later. And she kisses him on the cheek and then leaves herself.
So we know very well what Piper meant when she was saying lock all the doors. Obviously, the attic. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler because pretty much Glen ends up being able to get into the attic.
Yes. And I do like, Paige kind of pointing out here again that she wants to have that normal life and having a friend is part of that, which is something we saw Piper obviously wanting earlier this season. So,
Exactly. Like we see that has always been a big thing for Piper, having a normal life and this and that. And when it comes to it interjecting with her life, it's a problem. But when Paige does it, and not even so much Phoebe or ever with Prue, has she really been that concerned? It's just like with Paige, maybe it has a little bit to do with like now she has a husband who already gets to know about these things and forgot that it's kind of a little more complicated when you have nobody else in your life that can be aware of those things and you have to try to find that balance.
yeah, there's also two things it's making me think of. So, the first is that it's giving me a little bit of a flashback to the way that we learned in season 3 that Prue was always jealous of Phoebe's ability to be free because she didn't have that responsibility of being the oldest sister. So, I think I'm seeing a little bit of that parallel here. I'm also seeing the fact that for the sisters, they've always had this secret with each other and they have this lifetime connection. Whereas Paige is new to this family and her longest existing connection is with Glen. So, not being able to share this with the person who's known her the longest has to be extremely difficult, considering that, yes, she has her sisters, but not in the same way that they have each other because they don't have that foundation of 20 plus years of friendship and sisterhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. It makes me think the same things. I mean, how can Piper really expect Paige to understand that fully when she hasn't gone through it the same way that they have as sisters?
Yeah.
They had each other like that. So then we move on to like jail or something, like an interrogation type room. And Piper and Leo walk into an interview room with Stan's lawyer. And he's saying that he doesn't understand who they are. And Piper's like, didn't Inspector Morris vouch for us? And he says, yes, but that doesn't really. And Leo's like, then all you need to know is that we might be able to save your client. Isn't that enough? He says, look, the jury's deliberating. Nothing short of a miracle can help him now. And Piper says, precisely. Then Stan walks in with a guard who uncuffs him. He asks them if there's a verdict, but his lawyers tells him that they haven't decided yet and that these people want to talk to him. And he asks who they are, and Piper's like, we're people who believe you're innocent. So if you don't mind, we'd like to ask you a few questions. And Leo says, "Was there anything in your premonition to indicate who the killer might be?" Then his lawyer starts to tell them to go because they're not talking about the vision anymore unless they want him to plead insanity. And Stan says, wait, you actually believe me about having a premonition? And Piper's like, yes, we do. That's why we need to know exactly what you saw if we have any chance of saving you. And he says, oh, I don't need a premonition to know who killed Angie. It was Wyke, Andrew Wyke. He owns the magic club where I performed. And Leo says, why do you think he killed her? And he says that she was a bookkeeper and he was money laundering. And she told Stan, and he killed her and framed him. And Piper's like, do you know if Wyke has a tattoo of Medusa head on his arm? And Stan says that he doesn't know. And Piper's like, well, let's just hope that he does. Thank you. And then they go, and Stan and his lawyer just kind of look at each other.
So I guess they're just like I love how they walk in, they're like, who are you? They're like, none of your business.
Yeah,
Just
like,
answer my question.
I don't think it works like that easily typically, but plot's sake.
Exactly. But I do like the way kind of Stan reacts here when they believe him and kind of sharing this information, getting us to what we need to know about the plot and this Andrew Wyke who might be the killer.
Yeah. Which kind of makes me sad that Stan already knows, or in his mind, like, is convinced of who the killer of his wife is, and he's the one that's on trial. Like, imagine the pain this poor guy's going through.
I know. Like, it seems like, and I mean, we'll see this later as the episode goes on, but they obviously had like a healthy divorce. Like, they don't hate each other. They were still like in each other's lives. So it's really sad that he's then getting blamed for her murder.
Exactly.
So then we're at like the magic club, and Piper and Leo walk in, and Leo's like, maybe we should come back at night when they're open. And Piper's like, I don't think we have that kind of time. And the place is like super messy. There are rats. And Piper freezes one, and Leo makes fun of her because she can handle demons, but not rats. And then this man walks over and asks who they are and what they're doing there. Piper says, we're friends of Stan Provisoli's. He's like, good for you, we're closed. And she's like, yeah, I see that. I was just hoping. He's like, I said we're closed, and I don't want to have to say it again. Leave. And he points to the door, and we see the tattoo on his arm. So do Leo and Piper, and they look at each other and then go.
I love that, like, in order to make them a bad guy, like, they just like, make them an asshole to everyone that exists on the planet. Like, hey, we're closed. Oh yeah, I said get out of here, bitch. Like,
Also,
the
can
vibe
we
they do
just
that with
point out the
everybody.
fact that this is San Francisco, but for some reason this guy is from the Bronx?
Genuinely.
But it's only because this is money laundering. That's why they made him like a New York Italian.
Yeah. The way that and I mean and just everything about it. It's just I love the way early 2000s or 90s TV shows always made everybody the same way. Like, let's make them act like this so everybody knows that that's the kind of person that they are. Like,
yeah, because the Medusa head on his arm wasn't going to tell us he was a bad guy.
Yeah.
We had to like really know.
Because the fact that he killed somebody was not going to give it away to us. He had to be like the biggest douche in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So then we go back to the jury room, and the jurors are fanning themselves and visibly annoyed. And Phoebe's like, all I'm saying is to reach a fair and just verdict, we need to analyze every aspect of this case. And then the foreman says, we've already done that. And this one woman says, twice. And she says, you know what? Maybe we should do it a third time. Because it seems to me that you people care more about getting home for dinner than about the fact that the evidence against Stan Provisoli is entirely circumstantial. And then the jokester guy says he led the police to the body. You heard the shrink say that's as good as a confession. And she says, unless it was a premonition. And he's like, she's back to that again. She says, is it so hard for you to believe that that's possible? That there are powers beyond what we can see? And everyone gets annoyed. And Phoebe's like, okay, haven't any of you ever known who was calling before you answered the phone? Look, just because you don't understand magic doesn't mean that you have to be afraid of it. It's around us all the time, like a friend, guiding us, giving us inspiration, helping us fall in love, giving our lives meaning. And I'm sorry, but I think we all need to believe that magic exists. And then she leans next to the woman from before, and says, Tanya, why are you wearing that angel pin? And she says, I don't know, just because my mother gave it to me. Phoebe asks why she gave it to me, or gave it to her, and Tanya says, to watch over me. And Phoebe says, that's magic. Something you can't see, something you can't quite put your finger on, but you know it's there. And the jokester says, the man killed a woman, period, end of story. And the foreman says, all those in favor of another vote? Then everyone raises their hand, and we hear the white lighter jingle from the bathroom, and Phoebe sees the edges of the door glow and says, oops, nature calls, and she runs to the bathroom, and everyone is pissed.
Yes.
So this is what I meant when I was talking about earlier. Like, we see Phoebe doing kind of pretty decent job at, like, defending and trying to convince them without giving it away fully. Like, that whole thing with Tanya, I felt like that was a pretty good, like, if you don't believe in these things, then why are you doing things like that? You know what I mean? I think it was like Phoebe kind of was doing pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think her speech was a little cheesy,
Yeah.
but I do think that she was doing a good job at trying to get her point across to these people and kind of bringing up, like you said, that little thing with Tanya, which I think was effective, though obviously the jokester and the
Shut it
others
down.
are not having it.
Yeah, they shut it down real quick. Even the foreman's getting annoyed, who kind of gave in as soon as the jokester started talking.
Yeah. So then we're inside the bathroom, and Piper and Leo are there. It's a party. And Piper says, hi. Phoebe's like, hi. And they tell her that they found the killer. It's Wyke. And Phoebe asks if they can prove it. Piper says that's the next step. She says, okay, well, you've got to hurry because I'm dying in there. And Piper's like, it would be so much easier if we could just vanquish him. Leo says, you can't do that, but you might be able to use your magic. And Phoebe says she'd like to turn one guy into a warthog. And Leo says, not on the jury, on the killer. You and Paige could use your powers to scare him into confessing. Piper says, and show our powers to Wyke? I do not think so. And he's like, do you think anyone's going to believe him if he says anything? Phoebe says, not this jury. And the jokester bangs on the door and she's like, sorry, can somebody find me a plunger? And Piper looks at the toilet and Phoebe's like, what? I've got to buy us time somehow. And you got to call Paige. Maybe there's a spell in the Book of Shadows we can use. And tells them to go and they orb out and then Phoebe leaves the bathroom.
I love this here. Phoebe's just willing to say and do anything to get this jury to like stall a little longer. Aside from that, I do like kind of Leo's idea of like maybe we can scare him into confessing. It's nothing that they haven't done before. Like it worked with what was her name? Shailene?
Yeah, but that was the ghost doing it. It wasn't them using their powers.
Yeah, but either way, it was very clear, like, the magic, and then they came up to them after, like, what happened? You saw a ghost? Like, you know what I mean?
That's fair, yeah.
So, the fact that we know it's worked before, and, like, you know, we also know that our Leo's able to have this kind of, like, way to erase memories, memory dust, or whatever he's used on a whole group of kids when they first met Sam. Like, I don't think that it would be impossible for them to use that and then kind of get away with it, personally.
Yes, though obviously you're spoiling what's gonna happen in the episode.
Am I?
Yes.
Oh, he does use it on them, doesn't he? Okay, well, I didn't think about that. I actually forgot that he did that, but it was just like the past of like things they've done and gotten away with. Like, I feel like they have so many options without it being like a personal gain reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I do get Piper's kind of worry here about showing their powers, but obviously, as we're going to see as the episode goes on, one of the lessons they want us to learn, of course, is that the lives of innocents need to come before fear of exposure, which I feel like we've gotten the opposite of that lesson at times, but
Yeah, hot and cold. They give us a new lesson every episode, I swear. Whether it contradicts past or not.
true.
So then we go back to the manor and we're in the attic, and Glen is flipping through the book, and Paige walks in and says, Piper, are you up here? What's the emergency? She opens the door and sees him and asks what he's doing, and he says that he found these weird bags in the fridge and started snooping around. Says, found more than what I bargained for. And she says, look, I can explain everything, okay? I really can. I just have to do it later because if Piper finds us up here, she's gonna freak. And he says, Piper's gonna freak. I just found out that your new sisters have you messing with the occult in a pretty serious way, and you're worried about how they're gonna freak? She says, look, we're not messing around with the occult. We're witches. My sisters and I are born good witches. We do good magic. And he says, this book is full of pictures of demons and warlocks. And she says, demons and warlocks that we fight and destroy. And he says, these girls have you brainwashed. I mean, how do you even know that these are your sisters? And she says, Glen, you gotta trust me, please. I am not brainwashed. I am still the same old Paige. Only now, if I make a rhyme, magic happens. And he's like, Paige. Then she starts talking to him about going to Africa and meeting witch doctors, and some culturally insensitive comments are a little bit made. And then Paige flips to a spell for stretching the imagination to try to help him understand. He thinks that nothing will happen when she says the spell, and she says that if that's true, he can drag her off to the funny farm. So she casts it, and he says that he doesn't feel any different. Then they hear Piper calling from downstairs, and she says that they need to hide him. And he puts his hand on her shoulder as she starts to walk off, and his arm just like stretches across the room with her. And she's like, it's the spell, just pull it back. And he does and looks down at his arm, just very shocked that this actually worked.
So I feel like Glenn's reaction here is pretty justified. Finding all this weird stuff, doing some snooping around. I love how he's just lounging on the chair with the Book of Shadows.
I
It's so
know.
funny. But also the fact that, of course, he's like, Paige, like these people are brainwashing you. Like he's concerned, he wants to protect her, get her out of there. And Paige, of course, is like, Glenn, no, like that's not what's going on. And so we have that kind of back and forth, which I think shows us a pretty good dynamic between these two and the connection they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I can't lie, where Glenn's coming from as someone who genuinely isn't a part of this, genuinely doesn't understand. Any normal person would probably react the same way. Like, you're pretty mixed up in some weird shit that like you're being brainwashed. And I think honestly most people would kind of feel that way at first, you know? Especially for it to be at that extent where he's finding like toad legs and things like that in the fridge, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, he's going to be concerned a little. And then we see Paige here trying so hard to defend and explain and get him to understand, and not even really being that concerned with him knowing about it, just being concerned with him being able to understand it, which, like you said, I think shows a lot about their relationship and their friendship as a whole, you know?
Yes. I also do want to mention briefly kind of like the culturally insensitive comments that come up. Again, we have a case of a show created by white people where they're mentioning a country somewhere else in the world. In this case, they're just talking about Africa as a continent. We don't even have a specific country, a specific culture, or anything. And just talking about, like, oh, they're into this kind of stuff. And like, you've been there. And he's like, they do these things that are so weird because we're American and that's not normal to us. And like, it's just there's better ways to kind of go about it. They could have been more researched and kind of talked about the culture in a way that felt authentic and specific as opposed to like general and kind of racist. What was going on here.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely wasn't research. You guys don't really know what you're talking about, so what are you speaking on? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And it's also far from the first time we've seen something like that in this show, though usually we've seen it with Asian cultures most often.
oh yeah, we have quite a few times.
Yeah.
It's a lack of understanding and it's a lack of research that we're noticing a lot in this show, that they feel like, okay, whatever. This is just what we think is going on, so we're just gonna throw that in there without actually knowing what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's far from the only show from this time period to do that. I know specifically Buffy the Vampire Slayer did it a fuck ton. So ultimately, I think the issue is just the fact that they're just seeing Africa, one, as like Africa's 53 different countries,
Yeah.
all with different cultures, all with different things. So they're just saying, like, oh, this far away, distant, like barbaric land of Africa, as opposed to like generally talking about the culture and a specific culture in any way that shows sensitivity or research to the people there. Because I don't have a problem, specifically me, with using myths or legends of other cultures in your own creative thing. as long as you're respectful and researched of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue comes when you're taking this idea that people already have, this preconceived notion that is not accurate, and just playing into it in a way that it doesn't feel important to the storyline. If it was something that was well done and connected to the story, like they've done with some of the Asian myths, like when
Right,
they
it
had the
was just
Zen
kind of
master,
thrown
it
in
felt
there.
really important to the plot line. Here it's just thrown in there to be like, oh, like Glen travels, he's so worldly.
Right. Yeah.
And then the only other thing I'll say for this scene is obviously we have this spell going awry, which I think will continue to play a piece in the episode.
Absolutely.
So then Piper and Leo walk into the attic, and Paige is like, oh, I was giving Glenn a tour of the house. Next stop, the basement. Come on, Glenn, why don't you get a head start? And he walks out, and Piper's like, a tour of the attic? And then she looks over and notices that the book is open and this really dramatic music plays. And she's like, you showed him the book? And she's like, well, he went into the fridge and he saw the potion ingredients. So, understandably, he started looking around and he found the book. And Leo's like, so you didn't lock the attic? And she's like, it didn't occur to me. And Piper's like, what do you mean? I told you to lock all the doors before you go. She's like, well, I thought you meant the front door. Maybe you should have been more specific. She's like, well, I was speaking in code. And she's like, listen, I trust Glenn. And Piper's like, yeah, but you're trusting him with a secret that is all of ours, not just yours. And Leo says, honey, she didn't tell him about it. He discovered it. And she's like, because she left him in the house, because she let him stay in the house in the first place. And Paige is like, okay, so you're saying I have to choose between having any friends and being a witch? And Piper says, yes, I have. And she says, well, I won't. And Leo says that they need to put this on hold and get to work. Piper needs to fill in Paige and he's going to go check on Phoebe. He orbs out and the two sisters look at each other mad and then walk out of the attic.
I mean, like, I understand Piper here, but I gotta say, I kind of agree with Paige. Like, Piper, of all people, is the most adamant about things like that. And then to kind of, like, come at Paige this heavily and this angrily, like, they've all had people and situations where they're like, okay, well, if you trust this person, then I support you. You know what I mean? I guess to be fair, they didn't grow up with Paige. They don't know fully yet, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of understand where Paige is coming from. I can't lie. It's like, hey, I'm telling you as your sister, like, I trust this man. I believe we're okay. And it was a mistake. And, and Piper's just like, fuck that. You have to pick, like, magic or a life. Like, Piper, you've always been the one that's so adamantly against that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think to kind of defend Piper a bit, when previously things like this have come up, it has always been in a romantic context and it's always been discussed between the sisters first. It's never just been like,
True.
I did it without first asking. And the other part of it, I think, is what I was talking about before, which is that oldest sister jealousy for the younger sister having something that they're not able to have. So we already saw Piper struggling so much with her friendships earlier in this season because of the secret and because of magic keeping her away from her friends. Like the line that really solidified that for me is when she's like, I gave up all my friends for this. And Paige being like, well, I won't do that.
Yeah.
It's very Prue and Phoebe. It's very like, I have to sacrifice and have this responsibility as the oldest sister. And now I see my younger sister doing whatever she wants and I'm getting mad about it because I want it for myself too.
Right, because you are incapable of having that, and you've shown that several times that like the difficulty, the sadness that it gives you that you can't have that and can't do that, which is why you're kind of projecting it onto Paige in a way. And I like that we have Leo being the understanding Leo that he always is, trying to be the little mediator. But I mean, everything you're saying is valid. I definitely understand both sides. But to be fair, like it was an accident for Paige. She should have been more cautious, which I fully understand Piper being that pissed off about, especially being aware that Piper wasn't comfortable with it to begin with. But at the same time, Piper kind of telling her, like, oh, you have to pick because I had to pick is like not really fair when she's someone who makes it everyone's problem that she can't have a normal life. You know what I mean?
100%. And I
Yeah.
think that comes from the fact that Piper is emotional. Maybe if it were a discussion, right, and not like Glenn found out and now Piper's pissed,
Yeah.
this could have gone a little differently. Also, I just like to call out when Paige is like, I thought you meant lock the front door. They never fucking locked the front door,
Right.
Paige.
That door is always open. You know how many demons and they're like, oh, it's just easier to leave it unlocked. Like, come on. Come on, Paige. You know damn well. Maybe subconsciously she wanted Glenn to kind of find out and wanted him to have like the knowledge. Like I feel like a part of her hated that she had to lie to him.
Yeah, I could see that. That's fair. That's valid. I like that.
Like, you know, how we do things and we're like, oh, like I didn't purposely or like consciously do that, but obviously a part of me like did want that person to know, so it's not like I hate that that happened. You know what I mean? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe you subtly did do things on purpose.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, then we move back to the jury room, and Phoebe is discussing magical history with the jury, and the foreman interrupts her and calls for a vote and says, if we can't agree, we declare hung jury. And then he starts the vote, and Phoebe stands up and says, people, please. There is magic in the world. There are angels and there are fairies. I mean, just think back to your childhood before you were too jaded to believe in them. And Cupid. And the foreman calls for a bailiff, and she says, what are you doing? And he's like, we don't have to declare a hung jury after all. And the jokester's like, we don't? Then the bailiff comes in, and he says, we have a juror that's not quite right. We're asking that she be dismissed and that you bring in one of the alternates. And the bailiff asks if all of them agree, and they all do. So he starts to go, and Phoebe's like, no, wait, wait, wait. I have an idea. If I can convince you, all of you, that magic really does exist, will that be enough reasonable doubt for an acquittal? And the jokester's like, lady, you're late for your shrink. Like 2 years late. And Tanya says, well, what do you mean magic? Like Siegfried and Roy stuff? And she says, no, I mean real magic. No trapdoors, no smoke, no mirrors, just real, supernatural magic. And the jokester's like, come on, she's stalling. And Phoebe's like, what's the matter? Are you afraid I might actually be able to pull it off? And then they all kind of agree to let her try. And they say that if she fails, then she votes guilty with the rest of them. So she agrees to this. And Tanya's like, all right, show us some magic. So Phoebe turns to the bailiff and says, I'm going to need a few things: a sage stick, 5 white candles, and incense. I'm going to summon the dead.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exposure.
Yeah, she's really putting it all at risk for this, you know? Save this one innocent or expose their magic. Like, that's kind of a hard position, but again, that's kind of the lesson she's had to learn. She did everything she could, and she's like, you know what, at the end of the day, I can't let this man be put away for something that he didn't do, you know?
Yes. And while morally I agree, I do have some conflicting feelings about the ethics here because at the end of the day, is saving this one person worth them potentially getting exposed and not being able to help anyone else in the future?
Ever again. Yeah, that's definitely something I've thought about. But again, I feel like that's something we run into a lot in this show. And
I feel like we've gotten the opposite message in the past. Like, remember in Apocalypse Not when it was like, oh, do we save Prue or save the world? And they had to save the world. And here it's like, well, do I save this one witch or do I save the world? And it's kind of giving us, spoiler to the end of the episode, the opposite message here.
yeah. I think the difference here that they're kind of showing is like it's not like a choice of like, oh, either we save this guy or save the entire rest of the world. You know what I mean? In Apocalypse Not, it was very much is quite literally save our sister or the entire world is done for, like over. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So here I think maybe it's that risk of like, you know, it's a small room, it's a different type of thing in some ways, but I do feel like they are giving us quite the opposite message of what we've had in the past. So I can kind of understand it, but also like make up your mind, I guess.
Yeah. Like, I definitely think it's a good message and it works with the idea of the sisters being heroes. But again, it does kind of conflict with what's more important, the entire world or saving this one innocent, kind of like we're saying. But I
Absolutely.
do like the way that Tanya is the one who in this scene is kind of like, well, what do you mean by magic? So her kind of having the angel pin and then being the one to kind of
Have a little bit of like, all right, maybe it's possible.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out in this scene is just earlier on when they're willing to kind of throw Phoebe away as a juror because she has mental health issues, apparently, kind of making these references to like, oh, you need a shrink, and like, we have this juror who's not quite right, and just, you know, again, this is before kind of like therapy was normalized in society. So, kind of throwing out that idea of like, oh, she's quote unquote crazy. Like, we got to get her to a therapist, like that kind of thing.
She's hysterical.
Oh, she is. She is. She's on her period too. Like, oh, fuck. Like,
Oh my god. We have a juror that's on their period, guys. Can we bring in one of the alternates?
she's on her period and she's acting crazy. But yeah, I mean, we had that there. And of course, we have this idea that Phoebe has to pull out that big gun to kind of.
Convince them
Exactly.
and save this guy.
So then we're at the Magic Club, and Piper and Paige walk in, and Piper's like, you play Good Witch, I play Bad Witch. And she's like, okay, but won't that risk exposing our powers? She's like, no, I'm only going to use my powers on Wyke. And once we get him to talk, we're going to use the tape to force him to confess to the police. She's like, so it's okay to show our powers to a murderer, but not to Glen. And Piper says, saving an innocent's life is worth the risk. Entertaining friends is not. And the curtain opens and they see Wyke, and Piper blows up this thing that he picks up. And she's like, boo. And he's like, what the hell? What are you? What do you want? And she's like, we want a confession. That's what we want. And Paige nods. And like her nod was so funny because she just like looks at him and just. Now this is an audio medium, so you guys didn't see that, but we both made the exact same face.
It was perfect.
Piper blows up a sign behind him, and Paige is like, careful, Piper, you might kill him. And Piper's like, so? And Wyke's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Piper's like, sure you do. And she keeps blowing up different things around him. She's like, Angela Provenzoli found out about your little money laundering operation. So you killed her, didn't you? And Paige is like, I've never seen her like this, pal. You might want to talk. And he looks scared, and Piper's like, you know what? This is getting boring. What do you say we move on to some body parts? And he's like, no, okay, okay, okay. All right, I admit it. I killed her. She was ready to march. Literally, he was.
He's like, no, wait. As soon as she said body part, starts covering up his dick.
He's like, I admit it, I killed her. She was ready to march the cops down to Pier 86. If I hadn't killed her, they would have. And then they would have killed me. And they're like, who? The cops? He's like, no, not the cops. Look, believe me, you don't want to know. And he starts backing up, and Piper's like, try me. And he throws something on the floor, and all this smoke appears, and he vanishes. And Piper's like, what the? And Paige is like, he's pretty good. And they go over and look for a trap door and find it, but can't figure out how to open it, and then start looking for stairs.
I like this whole like mindset that Paige and Piper come in with and this like plan that they have going for. I like that there's still this like animosity, intensity between them, but they are still just, game time. Like go right into knowing what they're doing. Piper's just so ready to be like boom, boom, boom. I will say I understand where Paige is coming from, where she's like, you guys talk so much about no personal gain, no exposure, and you're willing to do this to someone who would so easily rat us out versus somebody that Paige actually trusts. So I definitely understand like where she's coming from there. But I understand where Piper's coming from at the same time, where she's like, well, this is for an innocent, not just because we want to share our powers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I love the good witch, bad witch kind of thing they're doing here. I think they kind of both play it really well. I love when it brings out like back to like Paige being like buddy pal. Like I think it's really funny when that's kind of like in her dialogue. I think that's a cute little like character thing. We obviously get the idea here that something's going on at Pier 86.
But aside from that, I definitely think that, we're kind of getting that vibe that his whole like, oh, you don't want to know. You can get the idea. I don't know if you guys picked up on this. Maybe it's again one of those things that I noticed because I've seen already the show so many times. But like whenever they do that, it's involved something supernatural. And Phoebe has never gotten a premonition for anything that doesn't involve supernatural shit. You know what I mean?
But is it because, to kind of play devil's advocate, if I was seeing the show for the first time, could it be because the defendant, Stan, is
Supernatural
magical?
himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So even if it wasn't that, Wyke was involved with the supernatural, right?
Right, because we have seen Phoebe in the past be able to kind of see what the person saw, like be able to transfer, like, and share or send the same premonitions or visions. So that could have possibly been like that psychic energy that we saw, like in the Bo episode.
The other one I think of is in Secrets and Guys, where the little boy is kidnapped, who's magical, and then we're dealing with normal everyday criminals in that episode.
Exactly. So I guess you're right. Like people who first saw the show, like maybe you don't think there's something supernatural going on. But like I said, it could just be because I've seen it so many times that I'm like, oh, like it sounds like something supernatural might be involved when he's like, oh, trust me, you don't want to know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also the fact that he seems scared but not necessarily surprised by their powers.
Exactly. That kind of gives it away a little bit to me as well, which we haven't quite gotten there yet, but it's like next scene we're gonna see
Yeah.
what happens. Okay, so then down in the basement, White gets up from this mattress where he, fell through the trap door, and there's this rat on this pipe that's, skirting by, and he notices it and says, "Wait, don't. I can explain." And this rat morphs into a demon with these red eyes, and he says, "You stupid human, you told the witches everything, and they got it on tape." And he's like, "So what? They'll never find out about you guys." And the rat says, "Not from you, they won't." And he turns him into a rat and says, "Dinner time." And then a bunch of other rats appear and start eating him. And the demon is watching and then hears the door open and morphs back into a rat himself. Then the sisters come down the stairs and Piper makes fun of Paige for screaming when she sees a rat run out. But then Piper sees what's happening to Wyke. Well, doesn't know that it's Wyke, but he sees that the rats are eating this one rat, and she gets like surprised too and covers her mouth and like, oh, like, it was pretty comical.
I will say we've seen some kind of like gross stuff on this show before, but this might be the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I'm so glad you thought so because I was thinking the same thing. This was so gory and gross, and it was like you just see the rats feeding on this live rat and all attacking it. It was like sickening. Like at least when the demons get vanquished, they like go poof, Like this
Yeah.
is like ew, like rats are. And how do they make that happen? Like what were they like? Because those are real rats, no?
Yeah, I don't think they were actually eating it. I think it was just covered in something, so they were all going near it because it had like jelly or whatever on it. So they weren't actually like murdering the rat, obviously, but like they were trying to make it look that way, and it just looked disgusting.
Yeah, it was definitely did its job to look gory enough and like who wants to see whether it's a rat or not, like nobody wants to see something being freaking attacked brutally by like several other creatures. Like I hate that. Ugh. Definitely was an uncomfortable watch.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of what happened before that, we get the idea that obviously these rats are demons, and which is kind of funny and ironic because this episode is about like Angela ratting on them, which is why she got murdered. And we get the idea that obviously these rat demons are involved in Pier 86 and whatever's going on there.
And the sisters still don't know about these demons that they're involved in any way. So
Exactly.
definitely looking forward to see if and when that might come.
Yep. So then we're back in the manor in the entryway at night, and Paige and Piper walk in, and Paige is like, "I don't get it. Where did he go?" And Piper's like, "Is hell too much to hope for?" And Paige is like, "Yeah, well, at least we got his taped confession." Piper's like, yeah, but that's not going to save Stan or Phoebe for that matter. She's like, why don't we just give it to the police? And she's like, well, without Wyke, the confession is no good. Daryl could open up an investigation, but not in time to exonerate. And we see Glen is listening around the corner. And Paige asks what they're supposed to do. And then we see Glen reach his arm around and pinch Paige. And she yells and looks over at him. And Piper looks back at her and is like, what? And she's like, what? And Piper's like, that noise. And Paige is like, noise. And she's like, Paige, what's going on? She's like, nothing. Nothing's going on, Piper. Okay, gaslighting queen.
Literally.
And
She was so bad at it too. She was like, what? Noise? Where?
And then Glenn reaches out, and this time he grabs Piper's leg, and she's like, hey, and follows the arm back to Glenn. And she's like, you cast a spell on him? Are you crazy? And Paige is like, no, but somebody is. And Glenn's like, I was just trying to have some fun. I'm sorry. Piper's like, okay, but this is not supposed to be fun for you. This is not supposed to be for you at all. He's like, then I guess I better call off the tabloids. And Piper freezes him. And Paige is like, he was just making a bad joke. And she's like, yeah, funny, that's the first thing that came to mind. And Paige is like, he just thought he was being funny. Nobody got hurt. She's like, yeah, maybe you'd feel a little different if you'd lost a sister.
Yikes.
And Paige looks really sad. And Leo orbs in and points at Glenn. Piper's like, don't ask. And he's like, did you get Wyke to confess? She's like, yeah, and then he got away. How's Phoebe doing? He's like, not so good. She's trying to summon the victim, Angela. And Paige is like, wait a second. So it's not okay for me to tell my best friend Glenn that I'm a witch, but it's okay for Phoebe to tell an entire room full of strangers? And Leo's like, they were going to kick her off the jury. I think it was worth a try. Only it's not going so good. I believe she needs the power of 3. Piper's like, yeah, well, she's not going to get it. It's better for them to think she's a nut job than she's a witch. Leo says, there's an innocent man at stake, Piper. She's like, they'll convict him, then we'll go to the police. There will be a new trial, and then they'll release him. He says, you don't know that. But Piper has an idea and says that she's going to explain on the way. And Leo asks about Glenn, and Paige tells her to unfreeze him. She does. He's confused why everyone's in a different place. And Paige is like, stay here, order a pizza. I'll be back soon. And she kisses his cheek, and the 3 of them orb out, and Glenn is blatantly confused. And then we see there's a rat on the stairs.
Dun dun dun. So this whole scene, again, love it when we have our little angry, chaotic scenes. Again, gaslighting Queen Paige. We loved that. Because it's so funny when we see her like trying so hard, but it's obviously not something she's like very good at doing because it's not something she does a lot. She's like, what? What do you noise? Huh. Weird. Interesting how that happened.
Literally.
And I like that at least Piper here is still kind of arguing against Phoebe doing that and exposing them as witches. I think Piper still has that huge fear from what happened when Prue died, you know? So I think that a lot of
questions. Does Piper remember that, or was she just told about it? Because she was not down there when time reversed itself. Like, I know Phoebe and Cole and Leo all remember because they were down there, but like, does Piper remember what happened when she died?
I think that she was definitely told about it. And I think that just knowing about that itself kind of made her feel like, well, this would have never happened, you know, in the first place.
Definitely, definitely. And she
Whether
knows
she
that
remembers.
that whole situation is why Prue died. So I get that part of it, but I'm also wondering, like, I guess just in terms of like, does she remember the exposure? Which I don't think
I don't
she
think
does.
I don't think she remembers the exposure, but I think she remembers, or not remembers, but was told about how like she was the one that technically died on the table and this and that, and maybe has that feeling like it should have been me, and just like maybe the guilt and the fear of this happening again. And I don't know, it wouldn't be so out of line for her to have that fear, whether or not she remembers it or not. She knows it happened, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I do think, like, I don't know, maybe it's just me not understanding the way the law works, but like, why can't they go with just the tape?
No, that definitely, I was gonna say that too. It doesn't quite add up. I mean, definitely going with the tape and having a taped confession would happen in time to exonerate him, or at least have like a mistrial and like relook over the information. So I don't know why they kind of made it sound like that. Again, something that I think is for plot's sake.
Definitely, because I feel like even Piper's plan where she's like, well, we'll like give them the tape and they'll reopen the investigation and he'll get out. Like, I feel like all of that.
It's valid and would happen. You don't know that. Like, yeah, we do. We have a taped confession. Like, it's not that.
Yeah.
And worst case, they end up in the same situation again where they actually like this is Piper being like, hey, here's an option, a route we can go that wouldn't risk exposing magic, but they're choosing to take that route instead. Where even if they had gone that route and it didn't work out, then they can expose the magic to prove it again. You know what I mean? Like, so definitely again very plot sakey. I think the only other thing I'll say here is like kind of how sad it makes me when Piper brings up thing, and I've said it before, like things like that, like, oh, maybe if you'd lost a sister, like Paige did lose a sister, and she also spent what 23 years of her life without knowing that she even had sisters. Like that's kind of fucked up to say, Piper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really unfair thing to throw in her face.
Yeah, like you can't hold that against her. And you know how much it hurts Paige. Like again, I wish the show would kind of bring that up, like Paige's version of like I wish I had met Prue kind of thing, but we never really hear about that, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Or at least haven't yet, and I feel like that's something that you would think would come up when it's so fresh, you know? So
Yeah, like if it was going to come up at all, it would be coming up in these early moments.
exactly. So then we're back in the jury room, and Phoebe is doing the spell, but nothing happens again, and she keeps trying. Then the foreman starts calling the bailiff to tell the judge that they reached a verdict, and they start voting. And Phoebe tries the spell again, and then all of a sudden she sees the bathroom door open, and Piper's hand pokes out and freezes the room. And the sisters walk out, and Piper's like, Phoebe, 11 jurors? And Phoebe's like, I know, but the guy is innocent, and he's being persecuted for having the same gift that I do. So if you guys aren't here to help me summon Angela, and Piper's like, we are. And Phaedra's like, we are? And Piper's like, yes, if Leo will help us clean it up after we're done. And he says no. And she's like, what do you mean no? You've done it before. And he says, no, it is completely forbidden, except in cases of dire emergency. And Paige is confused about what they're talking about. And Piper tells her about the memory dust that Leo has. And she says, wait, white lighters can erase people's memory with some special dust? Why don't you just use it all the time? And he says, because you don't know what you might be erasing. Doctor's appointments, children's birthdays. And Piper's like, Leo, this is an emergency. I cannot live with these people knowing our secret, knowing that at any minute we could have to relive the hell we went through with Prue. And he says, okay. And then the sisters get together and do the spell. And then the other two sisters and Leo run back into the bathroom and hide, and Piper unfreezes the room. And then, Piper, Paige, and Leo are about. And then Angela's spirit appears while the room's unfrozen, and everyone is shocked. And Angela asks where she is, and Phoebe says that Stan needs her help. And Angela says that he couldn't hurt a fly, even his gift terrified him, and said that Stan could see things, the past, the future, and that it terrified him. So he never nurtured it. All the good he could have done, wasted. And Phoebe says, so he didn't kill you. And she tells them about Wyke and the money laundering, and that Stan is good and innocent. And she says, blessed be, and fades out. Then the jurors all look at each other, and Phoebe's like, shall we vote? like you didn't just blow their damn minds. Like, everybody good? Like that was pretty funny.
So, like I pointed out in the notes, when Leo's like, we're only allowed to use the dust in times of dire emergency, like that time he had to get the manager of Dishwalla to perform at P3 and used it on him.
Yeah, definitely not a dire emergency, I'd say. And like, I think claiming like, oh, it's bad. You don't know what we could be erasing. Doctor's appointments. Someone might forget somebody else's birthday. Like, I think this is a little more important than that.
Literally, like, should we keep an innocent man in jail, or should someone have to reschedule their doctor's appointment?
Maybe we don't know because our father has never remembered our birthdays. So maybe I just don't know. I don't ever have to care if someone remembers my birthday or not. But I mean, maybe it's a big deal for normal people. So.
Maybe. Let us know in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a little
out there. But you know, I understand again for plot's sake where he's like, no, we can't do this because if they could use it all the time, then it would kind of take away a lot of the issues that they have throughout the show, you know?
Yeah, because it would be like, well, we could just expose ourselves and then wipe their memories, whatever, no big deal. So they
Yeah.
have to kind of make it seem like it is a big deal and that this is kind of like a very once in a while type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that, this was the plan Piper came up with. I think it makes sense. I think it works, especially given how afraid she is of exposure in this episode and just in general.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked seeing Angela and kind of the way she spoke about Stan's gift and him being afraid of it and not nurturing it, which I think is one of those things that again reminds us how lucky the sisters are to have each other in this situation. Because had any of them been alone, maybe they would have felt the same way, not nurtured their gifts, and not become the amazing, powerful women and witches that they are.
I definitely agree.
So then we go to the courtroom, and the foreman says, not guilty. And Stan's lawyer is like, unbelievable. And the judge confirms the verdict. All the jurors agree, and he dismisses the case and adjourns. Piper, Paige, and Leo are all in like the audience. I don't know what you call it, but they're watching.
Yeah.
And Leo goes over. I don't know.
Stands, I guess, or I don't know either. Whatever.
And Leo goes over to the jury to dust them, and Stan goes over to Piper and Paige and says, I don't understand. How do you do it? And she says, we didn't. Angela did. And Phoebe walks over and says, hi. And Stan says, hi. And she says, you have a very special gift, and you did the right thing by going to the police. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. All that matters is that you used your gift to help people, and that's a beautiful thing. And they smile at each other.
Corny, but adorable. We love our corny, charmed moments.
It was, and I like that little like instant connection when they say hi to each other. I thought that was very cute and like a very effective way of quickly establishing that they kind of like know and like have that wavelength.
Yeah, like I think not only did it feel good that like okay, he was proven innocent and there were these random people there to help him, but also people that understand his gift, people that are willing to like be like, "Hey, we're in the same boat. You're not alone and what you have is something to be thankful for, not something to be scared of or not something to feel bad about."
Yeah.
And that instead of being like, "Oh, you're welcome," they were like, "It wasn't us, it was your wife. You know, she supported you." I'm not gonna explain how, don't ask any questions, but
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
because of her. Like if someone had said that to me, I can't lie. I'd be like, what do you mean it was Angela? Like, what did she say? How did you talk to Angela? You guys are fucking crazy. Did you guys kill her? Like, what's going on? I'd be very confused, but he didn't seem to have too many questions, so
No, he was like, magic.
yeah, he knew. Again, one of those things that we always think about that the sisters have, that just that intuition, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
So then we move back to the manor and we're in the parlor and the sisters walk in and Paige is like, so you guys have told people about being witches lots of times. And Piper says, yes, innocence, but only when we didn't have any other choice. And Phoebe says, our secret is never more important than saving somebody's life. And Leo thinks that they should enjoy this victory before debating. And then all of a sudden we see the rat coming down the stairs and Piper's like, it's not over yet. The killer is still out there somewhere. And then they hear groaning and turn around, and we see Glen floating and has like this red, glowy choker thing around his neck. And then the rat morphs into the demon and says, you have 1 hour to deliver the tape, or Stretch here is dead. And he speeds out and shatters the front door speeds out with Glen and shatters the front door, and the sisters all look out, just like shocked.
See, if they hadn't locked the door, this wouldn't have happened. So
Piper, it's your fault. You asked Paige to lock all the doors. I like that. I like that we still got a little bit going on because it felt like a very quick, happy ending, which we never seem to get in this show. So
Yeah, so I like this kind of extenuation of the plot with the killer. Even though Stan is innocent, they still have that whole debacle to deal with.
Mhm.
And of course, we have the sisters' ongoing debate of like Paige being like, well, you guys are fucking telling people left and right. Why can't I tell Glenn?
Exactly.
Which it works. I feel like most of the time they don't directly admit that they're witches, but they do have to show their powers in some way, things like that to the innocent. So it is understandable Paige's side of this. And again, the sisters being like, well, that's to save their lives. It's not just because we want our friend to know our secret.
Exactly.
So then we're in the living room and everyone else is sitting on the couches, but Paige is standing. And Piper's like, Paige, it's going to be okay. Just try to breathe. She's like, if anything happens to him, she's like, we won't let it. Paige is like, when did this demon become involved? I thought this killer was supposed to be human. And Phoebe says he was, but apparently he was fronting for demons. Piper says, since when did demons give a rat's ass, no pun intended, about laundering money? Leo says because they need money to insinuate themselves into our world to buy clothes, rent apartments, fit in with us. Come on, Cole covered all of this in season 3.
Yeah, we already knew this, guys.
And Phoebe's like, it's probably the same way they made Cole legitimate when he was a demon. I mean, they put him through law school. Cole really went to law school?
Yeah, I thought he just kind of magically like pretended that was the case.
Yeah, because like whatever. So
Yeah.
Cole went to law school. I'm not even going to argue. Whatever. So Piper says, which put him in a position to hurt us. Water under the bridge. And Paige says, how's any of this going to help us get Glen back? Even if we give that rat demon thing the tape, what's to stop him from killing Glen? We have no leverage. Leo says we could go over his head. Look, I guarantee you that this club is just the tip of the iceberg. If we go to the rat demon's bosses and we threaten to expose their entire operation, they're not going to be very pleased with him. And Piper says, so we offer him up in exchange for Glen? Might work. And Paige says, might work. It has to work. And Piper asks where Demon Central is, and Phoebe says that Angela mentioned Pier 86. Piper says that they should go to the club and her and Leo will go to the pier. Paige wants to go with Leo and get Glen out of danger. She grabs her coat and they work out.
Again, still not completely clear on what Pier 86 is, but we find out, I guess.
It's a pier.
Okay, but like, what did that have to do with like any of it?
It's a shipping dock. So like they're bringing
the
in
money
illegal stuff for the money laundering
Oh.
through the shipping dock.
I'm sorry. Maybe I just like maybe I
You
feel
don't
like
understand criminal enterprises well enough.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you know more about it than I do. Who's really in the wrong here?
I've only seen Jersey Boys 852 times.
True. I guess that's valid. Aside from that, I love that we see Paige like so very clearly concerned here and like reasonably so and probably feeling a little bit like no this has to work. I can't believe like we put Glenn in this situation and I mean kind of like Paige and kind of did that whatever like by bringing him around. I know Piper's thinking I told you so. I just know
No,
it.
literally, she's like, well, if he wasn't staying in the house.
Literally, I just know damn well that's what's going through her head. But I like that she won't just like out and say it right now, you know?
Yes, definitely. And you know, obviously, we get again what Cole's already taught us that demons frequently kind of get involved with human things in order to make money and kind of create evil in the mortal world. I like this plan to kind of go to his bosses and see what they can do with that.
Absolutely. So then we go to Pier 86, and Leo and Paige are walking down, and she isn't sure that they're in the right place, but Leo hears all the rats squeaking and thinks that they should go. But she says no and says, listen up. We know what you're doing, and we're prepared to tell everyone. Just so you know, killing me won't help because my sisters will take you down. Maybe you've heard of us, the Charmed Ones. Now, who am I talking to? And then a bunch of the rats morph into demons, and Leo and Paige are like surrounded. And then three of them step forward, and one tells her that they're listening.
Ooh, I like this bad bitch.
I was
Paige.
just about to say word for word what you just said. Like, I'm loving this. I'm really loving Bad Bitch Paige. Like, when it comes to having to defend someone she cares about, she's like, we're not going nowhere. You guys fucking face me, you know?
Yeah, and it's again one of those Hallowell traits, always willing to jump in, put themselves right in the line of danger to protect and save the people they love.
Exactly. And innocence in general.
Yeah. So then we're at the club, and Piper and Phoebe are walking through, and the rat demon speeds in and says, "The tape." And Piper says, "Where's our friend, Mouse Man?" He says, "After I get the tape." Phoebe says, "No, before." And Piper, like, kind of stomps. She's throwing a little tantrum. I like it. And he's like, "I could take it from you." Piper says, "You could try." And he opens the curtain, and we see Glen there. And he's like, "Just so you know, if anything happens to me, anything at all, the ring will decapitate him." And Piper's like, "That's new." And Phoebe says, "So much for a quick getaway." And the demon walks towards them, and Phoebe hands him the tape, and he says, "Are there any copies?" She says, "No." Piper says, "Now let him go." And he starts tightening the ring. And Phoebe says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm a rat. What did you expect?" And Piper's about to blow him up, but Phoebe stops her. And then he lights on fire and vanquishes. And Piper's like, "Did we just do that?" And we see the other demons appear. And Leo and Paige orb in. And Paige runs over to Glen, and one of the demons picks up the tape. And he says, "Only copy?" Leo says, "Yes." The demon says, "How do we know?" Piper says, "What do you mean, how do we know? You just gotta trust us. We're the good guys, for crying out loud." And they release Glen, and he falls to the floor, and Paige holds him. And the demon says, "Guess we'll call this one a draw." And he shivers out.
So no final like vanquish here that we had. I mean, aside from the one rat demon, but I mean, at least we got Glen saved.
Yeah, I mean, we saved Glen. He was vanquished by his own kind. No big battle, no big fight in this episode. All the fighting was really done with words in this episode, which is interesting. I feel like we usually get at least one fight scene in an episode.
Yeah, this was a very like minuscule, like not so actiony kind of episode.
Yeah, I'd say not so violent, but the rat eating scene covered
True.
that more than enough.
Yeah, more than we needed.
But yeah, I mean, obviously we have this guy kind of bullshitting here, like, "Oh, if anything happens to me, like, Glen will die." Like, why do they fall for that?
I mean, I guess they're just not willing to risk whether or not that's true.
True, but I've seen like good and bad both use that excuse, and it's never fucking true.
I know.
But whatever, plot's sake, we have to believe people when they make idle threats.
Yep.
And then, this idea that he was gonna double cross them, but then he gets killed by his own bosses. And, I think it's really funny when Piper's like, "We're the good guys. Like, of course you should trust us. Come on."
She's like freaking out, like just let this guy go. Like just believe us. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Only copy. Like what? When do you think we had time to make a copy? Like, isn't this like a process of one time?
Literally, it's been like half an hour.
Yeah, like genuinely. So now we move to the final scene of the episode, and we're in the manor in the entryway, and it's morning time. We see Leo finishing rebuilding the doors, and
That was
Piper.
quick.
Genuinely, right? And Piper's like, "This is taking too long. Can't you just use a little magic?" And he says, "Don't you think we've used enough magic lately? Besides, I like working with my hands." And she says, "Yeah, I kind of like a guy in a tool belt." And they start kissing. And then Paige and Glen walk in, and she clears her throat, says that he's gonna go stay with another friend. And Piper's like, "Huh, I couldn't imagine why you wouldn't want to hang around here." And Glenn laughs and he's like, "Yeah, well, I like adventure, just not that much adventure." And Leo's like, "So you're gonna stick around a while?" And he says, "Yeah, keep an eye on old Noogie here." And he leads into Paige, and Piper turns to Leo and is like, "Noogie?" And Paige is like, "Glenn, I think it's time for you to go." So she walks him to the door, and Piper starts laughing. And he thanks Piper for saving his life and shakes her hand. Then she pulls on his arm, and Paige is like, "I reversed the spell." And Piper's like, "Just checking." Then him and Paige kiss each other, and they say goodbye, and then he goes. Paige goes, "Okay, do you want it now, or should I email it to you?" And Piper says, "What?" And she's like, "My apology. You were right. Keeping our secret is the most important thing. I should have listened to you. Do you want more? Should I keep groveling?" And Piper says, "Fun as that would be, I'm sorry too. I can be a little harsh, but it's part of my charm. You'll learn to love me for it." Then Phoebe walks in and says, "Wow, we actually have a door. Imagine that." And Paige is like, "So how's the jury?" And she says, fine. I knocked on Tanya's door and she thought I was the Avon lady. So good job, Leo. And he says, thanks, but I don't want to think about it ever. And Paige says, can ever wait a minute or so? And he's like, uh-oh. She says, I was thinking maybe we should use some of that dust on Glen. You know, I don't want you guys to have to be nervous. And Piper says, well, do you think he's going to tell anybody? She says, no. And Phoebe's like, and you trust him completely? Paige says, yes. Piper says, then so do we. And Leo says, thank God. And Phoebe's like, and whether we think it's smart or not, at least you have one person outside the family that you can talk to. And Paige puts her arm around them, and Piper's like, yeah, let's just keep it to one. And they head upstairs. I love it.
So this is an adorable final scene. We obviously get the little cute moment with Piper and Leo. We get the awkward but cute moment with Paige and Glenn where he's
Yeah.
kind of teasing her and, you know, her being like embarrassed about the little nickname.
Noogie.
Like, why did they pick that? But whatever.
I-
And then we get this final sister talk where both of them can kind of admit where they were wrong and kind of their fighting. And, you know, this idea of Piper kind of being like, you know, I could be a little harsh, but you'll learn to love me for it. I think that's how some people feel about you, Mia.
All right. All right, Jess, back off. I mean, fair enough. I can't lie. Everybody does love me for it though.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely agree. However, I will say it's weird that like Paige's takeaway was like, yeah, protecting our secret is like more important than anything, but
They
that's
were
kind of
literally
not the
telling
vibe we-
everybody left and right in this episode.
yeah, like that was not the moral of the episode at all.
It kind of feels like the opposite of the moral of the episode to me, but
I mean, fair enough. Like,
but she said it, so it must be the moral.
yeah, exactly. Classic.
Exactly. I do also like this kind of final moment where they decide that if Paige trusts Glenn, they do too. I thought that was really sweet.
Very
It shows
sisterly.
their growing bond as sisters and really shows us, I think, more so that they're all really warming up to each other. Like it's really
Yeah.
developing well here.
They gotta have that faith in their gut instinct and that intuition, like we already talked about, and kind of that feeling of trust within one another is very important to their relationship and them being capable of working as a team, you know? So I definitely think that them doing that was a very sweet thing and hopefully made Paige feel a little more welcome too and a little more like a part of the family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Final thoughts on the episode?
I mean, we definitely had some things that didn't quite add up, but per usual, this has never been one of my favorite episodes, and I still maintain that it's probably not one of my higher ups for this season or the show in general. But I think it was a good episode. I like that we had Glenn finding out. We see this is the second time he's made an appearance, so maybe we'll see him again. I do like Glenn. I kind of like the little relationship and sweetness they have, you know, Paige and Glenn have between each other. Aside from that, it didn't feel like much of a important episode, but it was entertaining to watch, you know?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, other than the fact that, like you said, Glenn finds out, I don't think there's anything in this episode that's really going to carry over or that feels like it's kind of leading to anything that's upcoming in the season. But I do like that. Like you said, maybe we'll see him back sometime in the future. This does show, you know, that Paige at least has someone outside of the family. Whether we'll physically see Glenn again or maybe she'll have like phone calls with him in the future or something like that, kind of someone to talk to outside of her sisters, which obviously Phoebe has with Cole and Piper has with Leo.
Exactly. So it's definitely beneficial for Paige at the very least. Again, yeah, like you said, it's not something that I feel we had any major plots that are going to be carried out throughout the season in this. But I like that, you know, we got a little more bond of them as sisters and a little more of that, you know, issues between Piper and Paige that we kind of always saw between Prue and Phoebe. I like that we get that between the two of them now. So, again, just pretty entertaining overall. A pretty decent watch. Decent to discuss,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Definitely an entertaining episode. Like you said, it's not like one of those like high rated, like amazing episodes, but it's not bad. I didn't
No.
dislike it at all.
Absolutely. Never have, really,
Yeah.
you know?
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. Or you can send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. Either way, we appreciate you listening and hope you'll join us back next time for Season 4, Episode 12, Lost and Bound.